I'm Rosalie, and I'm 32 years old now, sitting here in Vancouver, telling you about the worst day of my life, which was just over a year ago when I was 6 months pregnant, with my daughter Olivia, and my whole world fell apart, because my husband Ryan and my best friend Sarah betrayed me in the most gut-wrenching way possible. I can still feel the rage and the disbelief like it was yesterday when I found out Ryan was cheating on me with Sarah, who I'd known since college and trusted with everything in my heart. I was standing in my apartment living room shaking so hard I thought I'd collapse, and Ryan just stood there with his arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one making a scene when he was the one who'd been sneaking around behind my back. That moment hit me like a freight train, because everything I thought we had, our marriage, our plans for Olivia, our whole life together, was a lie, and I couldn't breathe through the pain of it all. It started when my friend Lauren showed up at my door one afternoon, her face pale and her eyes wide like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. I knew something was wrong the second I opened the door and let her in, because she was fidgeting and avoiding my gaze, which isn't like her at all. "Rosalie, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low and shaky as she stepped into the living room, and I felt my stomach twist because I could tell whatever she was about to say was going to change everything. She took a deep breath and looked at me with this pity in her eyes that made my skin crawl, and then she said, "I saw Ryan today with Sarah coming out of a hotel downtown together, and I didn't want to believe it, but they kissed right there in the hallway like they didn't care who saw them." My heart stopped, and for a second, I couldn't process what she was saying, because Ryan, my husband, and Sarah, my best friend together in a hotel kissing, was so far from anything I could imagine that my brain just refused to accept it. I felt my chest tighten, and my hands start to shake as I asked her, "Are you sure, Lauren? Because this is serious, and I need you to be absolutely sure." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears, and said my sister was staying at that hotel, and I was visiting her when I saw them coming out of a room together, and Rosalie, I know what I saw. They kissed, and it wasn't just a friendly peck, it was real. I sat down on the couch because my legs felt like they were going to give out, and I couldn't catch my breath, as the reality of it sank in like a knife twisting in my gut. Ryan, who I'd been with for 7 years, who promised to love me forever, and Sarah, who'd been at my baby shower just last month, planning Olivia's nursery with me, had been sneaking around together, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. I asked Lauren every question I could think of. Where exactly was the hotel? When did this happen? Are you sure it wasn't a mistake? But deep down, I knew she wouldn't lie to me about something like this because she's not that kind of person. She kept apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry, Rosalie, but you needed to know," and I just sat there staring at the floor, trying to hold myself together while my whole world was crumbling around me. I felt this wave of anger and humiliation and heartbreak all at once, and I couldn't untangle it, because every memory of Ryan and Sarah, every time they laughed together or hugged at a party, suddenly felt like a slap in the face, and I wondered how I could have been so blind. That night, I waited for Ryan to come home, my stomach in knots, and my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I was 6 months pregnant, and all I could think about was Olivia kicking inside me, like she could feel how upset I was, and it made me even angrier that he'd do this to us. When I heard his car pull into the driveway, I stood up from the couch and braced myself because I knew this was going to be ugly. He walked in like nothing was wrong, tossing his keys on the kitchen counter and loosening his tie, and I didn't even let him get past the doorway before I said, "How long has it been, Ryan, with you and Sarah?" My voice was trembling, but I kept it steady because I wasn't going to let him see me break. He looked up at me, confused for a second, and then his face hardened and he said, "What are you talking about, Rosalie? Don't start with this nonsense." I snapped back. "Don't you dare lie to me, Ryan, because Lauren saw you at a hotel with Sarah today, coming out of a room together, and she saw you kiss her, so tell me the truth right now." He scoffed and threw his hands up like I was being ridiculous, and said, "Lauren's out of her mind. Rosalie, she probably saw something innocent and twisted it in her head, because there's nothing going on between me and Sarah, we're just friends." But his voice was too defensive, and he wouldn't look me in the eye, and I could see the guilt all over his face like he was trying to talk himself out of a corner. I clenched my fists and shouted, "Don't insult my intelligence, Ryan, because Lauren isn't crazy, and you know it, so stop lying to me, and just admit what you did." He started pacing the kitchen, his jaw tight, and then he snapped. "Rosalie, you're blowing this way out of proportion, because Sarah and it just happened okay, and things haven't been great between us for a while. And honestly, you've let yourself go." He looked me up and down, his eyes cold, and said, "I'm not attracted to you anymore. Rosalie, you're always complaining about being tired, or your back hurting, and you look like you don't even care about yourself anymore. But Sarah, she's fun, she takes care of herself. And I'm tired of pretending I'm happy with you." His words hit me like a punch, and I felt my whole body go numb, because I was expecting lies or excuses, but not this kind of cruelty from the man I loved. I put my hand on my belly, feeling Olivia move, and I said, "Do you even care about us, Ryan? About your daughter who's inside me right now? Feeling all of this because of you." He glanced at my stomach for a second, but his face stayed hard, and he said, "This isn't about the baby, Rosalie, so don't make it dramatic, because I'm just being honest with you." I couldn't believe he was standing there tearing me apart while I was carrying his child. And I shouted, "You're destroying our family, Ryan, before Olivia even has a chance to be born, and you're telling me I'm the one making it dramatic." He just shook his head and said, "I'm done, Rosalie. I can't do this anymore, and I've moved on, so maybe you should too." That was it, the moment I knew he was gone, and the man I married didn't exist anymore. I stood there, frozen, my throat tight and my eyes stinging, but I refused to cry in front of him because I wasn't going to give him that power. I said, "You need to leave Ryan right now because I can't look at you anymore." He grabbed his keys and walked out without another word, and I locked the door behind him, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the bolt. I leaned against the door and let out a breath. I didn't know I was feeling this strange mix of rage and clarity, because I knew I had to protect Olivia and myself no matter what. The next morning, I started packing my things because I couldn't stay in that apartment, surrounded by memories of him. And I called my mom, who lives across town, and told her I was coming to stay with her. When I got to her house, she hugged me tight and said, "We'll get through this. Rosalie, you and Olivia are going to be okay." And for the first time that day, I felt a tiny bit of calm, like I could start rebuilding my life. After I left Ryan and moved into my mom Diane's house in Vancouver, 6 months pregnant with Olivia, my life was a mess, because his betrayal with my best friend Sarah had shattered everything, and I was trying to figure out how to keep going, while carrying this little girl who was counting on me to hold it together. Those first weeks at my mom's were like walking through a haze because I was so angry and hurt. I could barely think, and every night, I'd hear Ryan's voice in my head saying cruel things like, "I'm not attracted to you anymore. You've let yourself go." And those words stung so bad. I couldn't escape them, no matter how much I wanted to. Sarah never reached out, not even a text to explain herself, and I didn't waste my energy confronting her because she'd already shown me she wasn't worth my time, so I cut her out of my life completely, like she'd never existed. Ryan didn't just leave me. He walked away from Olivia too, and never sent a single message or a penny to help us, which made everything 10 times harder because I was drowning emotionally and had no money to prepare for my daughter's arrival. My mom tried so hard to support me, bringing me tea or checking on me every day, but I could tell it broke her heart to see me like this, and I hated that she had to witness my pain. I'd smile and nod when she asked how I was doing, but when everyone was asleep, I'd lie in bed crying until I was too tired to stay awake, because the weight of Ryan's betrayal and the fear of raising Olivia alone was crushing me. I was staying in my mom's spare room, which she'd started setting up as a nursery for Olivia, and I'd spend hours folding her tiny clothes, trying to focus on her instead of the chaos in my life. But it was so hard when I didn't know how I'd pay for anything. Ryan had been the one bringing in most of our money, and I'd been working part-time at a coffee shop before I got pregnant, but I had to stop because I was so sick all the time, and now I had no job and no savings to rely on. I applied for some government help, but the forms were confusing, and it took forever to hear back, so I was getting by on the little cash I had while my mom covered things like food and utilities. One night, maybe a month after I moved in. I was sitting on the bed, scrolling through my phone, and I don't know why, but I started reading old messages from Ryan, hoping I'd find something to show he cared about Olivia. Even a little, but that was nothing. Just empty silence. And it hit me like a brick that he'd wiped us out of his life like we were nothing. I got so mad. I started typing this angry message, telling him he was a terrible father and didn't deserve us. I was about to send it when I stopped myself because I realized he didn't care, and texting him would just drag me back into his mess, so I deleted it and threw my phone on the bed, shaking with anger because I hated that he still had this hold over me. My mom heard me crying and came in asking what happened, and I just fell apart in her arms, telling her I was scared I couldn't do this alone. She hugged me tight, saying, "You're stronger than you know, and Olivia's going to have everything she needs because you're her mom, and that's all that matters." That night changed something in me because I decided I wasn't going to let Ryan ruin me anymore, and I had to focus on what I could do for Olivia and me. I started looking for ways to earn money. Even though I was so pregnant, it was tough, and I found this online job writing reviews for products which paid a little, but I could do it from home. I also joined a prenatal group in Vancouver because I needed to talk to other moms who might get what I was going through, and it felt good to be around people who didn't know my story and didn't look at me like I was broken. We'd meet at a community center and talk about pregnancy stuff, like breastfeeding or crib safety, and it made me feel less alone because these women had their own problems and didn't judge me for being a single mom. One mom named Hannah told me about a program that gave baby stuff to parents in need, and I signed up and got approved for a stroller and some clothes, which took a huge weight off my shoulders because I was stressing about how I'd afford everything Olivia needed. Even with those steps forward, pregnancy was rough, and I was always tired with this constant back pain that kept me up at night. I'd lie awake feeling guilty that Olivia was coming into a world without a dad and without the life I'd planned for her, but when I felt her kick, it reminded me she was my reason to keep fighting, and I wasn't going to let Ryan take that from me. My mom kept me going, making me her lasagna, or sitting with me at night, talking about random things to distract me. But when she wasn't there, the loneliness was so heavy, and I'd stare at Olivia's little socks, wondering if I could really be enough for her. Then one day, everything came crashing down when the bank called and said, my joint account with Ryan was overdrawn by $500 because he'd been pulling money out for whatever he was doing and didn't bother telling me. I was furious because that was the last of my savings, and he'd stolen it, leaving me with nothing to pay bills or buy things for Olivia. And I couldn't believe he'd sink that low. I called him right away, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone, and when he answered, sounding irritated, I let him have it saying, Ryan, how could you take that money when you know I'm pregnant and struggling, and you haven't done a thing for your daughter while you're out there acting like we don't exist? He just laughed this ugly, bitter laugh and said, I don't owe you anything, Rosalie, so deal with it, and hung up. I stood in my mom's kitchen, gripping the counter so hard, my fingers hurt, and I felt this mix of rage and clarity because I knew he was never going to be the man I thought he was, and I was done waiting for him to care. I called the bank and shut down the account so he couldn't touch it anymore, and that night, I sat with my mom and made a plan to survive on my writing gig and her help until Olivia came. For the first time in a long time, I felt a small sense of calm because I was taking charge, and I knew Olivia and I were going to make it, no matter what. Those last few months of pregnancy at my mom Diane's house in Vancouver were some of the hardest I've ever been through because I was still reeling from Ryan's betrayal with Sarah and trying to piece my life together while getting ready for Olivia to arrive with no money and no idea how I'd manage as a single mom. I was so angry at Ryan for abandoning us and leaving me to deal with everything alone, and his words kept echoing in my head, telling me I wasn't good enough, which made it so hard to feel strong, even though I knew I had to be for my daughter. I'd cut Sarah out completely, and Ryan hadn't reached out since I closed our bank account, but their absence was like a heavy shadow hanging over me, and I was fighting every day to keep it from swallowing me whole. My mom was my rock, helping with bills and making sure I ate, but I could see the worry in her eyes, and it killed me to know she was carrying my pain too, and I just wanted to make it through each day without falling apart. Pregnancy was brutal, and I was exhausted all the time with this constant ache in my back and swollen feet that made it hard to even walk around the house. I was still doing my freelance writing gig, which brought in a little money, maybe $200 a month, but it wasn't enough to cover everything, and I was relying on government assistance and my mom's help to get by. I'd go to my prenatal group at the community center every week, and talking to the other moms helped me feel less alone. But I'd still come home and feel this guilt that Olivia was going to grow up without a dad because of Ryan's choices, and I hated that I couldn't give her the life I'd planned. I'd sit in the nursery folding her little onesies and blankets trying to focus on her, but the fear of failing her was always there, and I'd cry myself to sleep some nights, wondering if I was strong enough to do this on my own. One day, when I was about 8 months pregnant, I got a call from the hospital saying I needed to come in for an extra checkup because my blood pressure was high at my last appointment, and they were worried about preeclampsia, which scared me so bad I could barely think straight. I drove to the hospital with my mom, my hands shaking on the steering wheel because I kept thinking, what if something's wrong with Olivia? Or what if I can't handle this? And I was so angry at Ryan for not being there when I needed him most. The doctor ran some tests and told me I had to take it easy because my blood pressure was dangerously high, and if it didn't improve, I might need to deliver early, which terrified me because I wasn't ready and I didn't have everything set up for Olivia yet. I went home and followed the doctor's orders, resting as much as I could, but it was so hard to stay calm when I was stressed about money and Ryan and everything else, and I felt like my body was betraying me just when I needed to be strong. Those weeks were a blur of doctor visits and trying to keep my stress down while my mom hovered over me, making sure I didn't lift a finger. I stopped working because I couldn't sit at my laptop without feeling dizzy, and that meant even less money coming in, which made me panic because I had maybe $100 left after paying for prenatal vitamins and other basics. My mom kept saying we'd figure it out, but I felt so guilty relying on her, and I was furious at Ryan for putting me in this position when he was out there living his life without a care. I'd feel Olivia kick, and I'd talk to her saying, I'm going to make this work for you, no matter what, because she was the only thing keeping me going, and I wasn't going to let Ryan's betrayal break us. Then one night, at 37 weeks, I woke up with this sharp pain in my stomach, and I knew something wasn't right, because it wasn't like the usual aches I'd been having. I called my mom and she rushed me to the hospital, my heart pounding the whole way, because I was so scared that Olivia was coming too soon, or something was wrong. When we got there, the nurses hooked me up to monitors and said I was in early labor, but my blood pressure was spiking again, and they were worried about complications, so they decided to induce me right away. I was terrified lying in that hospital bed with my mom holding my hand, and I kept thinking, I can't do this alone, and where's Ryan when his daughter needs him? But then I pushed those thoughts away because Olivia was all that mattered. The labor was long and exhausting, almost 20 hours of pain and fear, but my mom stayed with me the whole time, telling me I was doing great, and I held onto her words like a lifeline. When Olivia finally came, I heard her cry, and the nurse placed her on my chest, and I looked into her tiny face with these big, bright eyes, and I felt this love so overwhelming, it washed away all the anger and fear I'd been carrying for months. She was perfect, her little fingers wrapping around mine, and in that moment, I didn't care that Ryan wasn't there, or that he'd chosen to walk away because I had Olivia, and she was mine. I cried happy tears holding her close, and my mom was crying too, saying she's beautiful. Rosalie, you did it. And I felt whole for the first time since everything fell apart. The nurses took Olivia to check her vitals, and I lay there exhausted, but calm, knowing I'd made it through the scariest moment of my life and brought my daughter into the world. Those first few days in the hospital were a whirlwind of learning how to feed Olivia and change her and figure out what her cries meant. But every time I looked at her, I felt this strength I didn't know I had. My mom helped me get settled at home, and I was so grateful for her, but I also wanted to do as much as I could on my own because I needed to prove to myself that I could be the mom Olivia deserved. I was still angry at Ryan for missing this, and I'd feel a pang of sadness when I saw other dads in the hospital holding their babies. But then I'd look at Olivia, and it didn't matter anymore, because she was my world, and I knew I'd give her everything I had. Coming home with her was the start of something new, and I felt this quiet calm because I'd faced the worst and come out stronger, and Olivia was the reason I was still standing. A few months after Olivia was born, when I was starting to find my footing as a single mom in Vancouver, living at my mom Diane's house, I decided to take a break and go to the mall for a few hours because I hadn't had a moment to myself since everything went down with Ryan and Sarah, and I needed to feel like a person again, even if it was just wandering around buying a couple of things for my daughter. I was feeling okay that day, pushing through the exhaustion of late-night feedings and my freelance writing gig because Olivia's smiles made it all worth it, and I was finally starting to believe I could do this on my own. My mom offered to watch Olivia so I could have some time alone, and I was walking through the mall, looking at baby clothes, feeling almost normal, when I heard someone call my name, and my heart stopped because I turned around, and there was Luz. Sarah looking like a ghost of the person I used to know with red puffy eyes and a swollen belly that told me she was pregnant too. I froze my stomach twisting because Sarah, the woman who'd betrayed me with my husband, was standing right in front of me, and before I could walk away, she rushed toward me, her voice breaking as she grabbed my arm saying, "Rosalie, I'm so sorry. I need to talk to you." I was so angry, I could barely breathe, because after everything she'd done, she had the nerve to act like she could just apologize and make it okay, and I wanted to yank my arm away and scream at her, but I just stood there staring because she looked so broken, it threw me off. She was crying hard, her hands shaking as she wiped her face, and said, "John left me, Rosalie. He lost his job a few months after we got together and started drinking and gambling, and when I told him I was pregnant, he just walked out saying he couldn't deal with it." Her words came out in a rush, and she was sobbing, so loud people in the mall were staring, but I didn't care because I was trying to process the fact that the woman who'd ruined my life was falling apart in front of me, begging for forgiveness. I felt this mix of rage and shock, because part of me wanted to yell at her for thinking I'd care about her problems after she'd slept with my husband while I was pregnant, but another part of me was stunned to see her so wrecked like karma had caught up with her in the worst way. She kept going saying, "I know I don't deserve it, Rosalie, but I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I was selfish and stupid, and I ruined everything, and I wish I could take it back. Please forgive me." I just stood there, my heart pounding, because for so long I'd imagined a moment like this, where she'd realize the pain she caused and beg for mercy. But now that it was happening, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would, and instead felt this cold clarity that she wasn't worth my energy anymore. I looked at her one last time, her face streaked with tears, and without saying a word, I pulled my arm free and walked away, leaving her crying in the middle of the mall, because I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. I got home shaken up, but trying to focus on Olivia because she was my priority, and I thought that was the end of it. But later that same day, I got another shock when I pulled up to my mom's house and saw Ryan sitting on the front steps, looking like he'd been through hell with messy hair and wrinkled clothes reeking of alcohol so strong I could smell it from 10 feet away. I was furious, because after abandoning us for over a year, he had the audacity to show up like he had any right to be in my life, and I felt my hands clench as I walked toward him trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up his eyes, bloodshot, and said, "Rosalie, I needed to see you. I'm sorry, I love you, and Olivia, please let me come back. I'll fix everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because this was the man who'd torn me apart and left me pregnant and alone. And now he was slurring apologies, like they meant anything after all the pain he'd caused. I said, "Ryan, what are you doing here? Because you don't get to show up now stinking of booze talking about love when you walked out on us without a second thought." He staggered to his feet, leaning against the porch railing, and said, "I know I screwed up, Rosalie. I lost my job, my money, everything, and I can't stop thinking about what I threw away. I love you, and Olivia, please give me a chance." I was so angry, my voice was shaking as I said, You love us. Where was that love when I was 6 months pregnant, and you were with Sarah, or when Olivia was born, and I was in the hospital alone? You abandoned us, Ryan, and you don't get to play the victim now." He started crying, his shoulders shaking, and said, "I've changed, Rosalie. I can be better. Just let me be part of Olivia's life. I'll do anything." But I just stood there feeling this clarity, because I knew he hadn't changed, and he never would, and I wasn't going to let him hurt us again. I took a deep breath and said, "Ryan, you're not part of our lives anymore. Olivia and I are better off without you, and you need to live with the choices you made." He broke down sobbing, but I didn't feel sorry for him, because he'd brought this on himself, and I was done carrying his mistakes. I stepped past him, unlocked the door, and closed it behind me, my heart racing, but my mind clear because I'd faced both Sarah and Ryan in one day, and I'd walked away stronger than ever. Inside, I leaned against the door, feeling the weight of it all hit me, but also this strange calm because the people who'd nearly destroyed me were ruined by their own actions, and I didn't have to do a thing to make it happen. I went upstairs to check on Olivia, who was sleeping peacefully, and I looked at her tiny face and knew I'd made the right choice, because she was my world, and I was going to give her a life full of love no matter what. After facing Sarah and Ryan in the same day, and walking away from both of them at my mom, Diane's house in Vancouver, I felt this fire inside me because I'd stood up to the people who'd nearly broken me, and I was determined to build a life for Olivia that they could never touch. I was still angry sometimes, thinking about how Ryan abandoned us when I was pregnant, and how Sarah betrayed me like our friendship meant nothing, but I wasn't going to let that anger control me anymore, because Olivia was my reason to keep moving forward, and every day with her showed me I was stronger than I ever thought. My mom was still helping me out, letting me stay at her place and covering some bills, but I knew I couldn't lean on her forever, and I wanted to give Olivia a home of our own, where we could start fresh without the shadow of Ryan and Sarah hanging over us. Those first few months after Olivia's birth were tough because I was juggling late-night feedings and my freelance writing gig, which was barely paying enough to cover diapers and formula, maybe $200 a month if I was lucky. I'd look at Olivia sleeping in her crib and feel this mix of love and fear because I wanted to give her everything, but I was still figuring out how to make it work as a single mom with no support from Ryan. I kept going to my prenatal group, which had turned into a parenting group, and the other moms were so supportive, sharing tips about budgeting or soothing a fussy baby, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone, even when I was exhausted, doubting myself. One day at the group, a mom named Hannah told me about a job opening at a local bookstore where they needed someone part-time to manage online orders, and I jumped at the chance because it paid better than my writing gig, and I could work while Olivia was with my mom. I applied and got the job, which felt like a huge win because it meant I could start saving for a place of our own, and I was so excited to tell my mom when I got home that I hugged her and cried, saying, "We're going to be okay, Diane. I can feel it." The job wasn't glamorous, just sitting at a computer processing orders and answering customer emails, but it gave me a steady paycheck of about $1,000 a month, and that was enough to start planning for the future. I'd bring Olivia to the bookstore sometimes when I had to pick up a shift, and the staff would fawn over her, saying she was the cutest baby they'd ever seen, and it made me so proud to see her light up a room even when I was bone-tired from working and parenting. Then, one afternoon, about 6 months after Olivia was born, I got a letter in the mail that stopped me cold because it was from a lawyer saying Ryan was trying to claim partial custody of Olivia and wanted to meet to discuss it. I was furious because he hadn't cared about her for a second since he walked out on us, and now he thought he could waltz back in and act like a father after leaving me to do everything alone. I called the lawyer right away, my voice shaking with anger, and said, "Ryan has no right to Olivia because he abandoned us when I was pregnant and hasn't sent a penny or a text in over a year, so tell him to stay out of our lives." The lawyer said Ryan was claiming he'd changed and wanted to be involved, but I wasn't buying it because I'd seen him drunk and broken on my mom's porch, and I knew he was just trying to control me again. I met with the lawyer a few days later at her office, my stomach in knots, because I was so scared of losing any part of Olivia to someone who didn't deserve her. I brought all the proof I had, like bank statements showing Ryan never contributed, and texts where he ignored my pleas for help, and the lawyer said I had a strong case because he'd shown no interest in Olivia's life until now. She filed a response, saying Ryan had no claim, and I felt this rush of clarity because I was fighting for my daughter and I wasn't going to let him take anything from us. The lawyer warned me it might go to court, but a few weeks later, she called and said Ryan had backed off, probably because he knew he'd lose, and I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders because I'd protected Olivia from him once, and for all, that victory gave me the push I needed to take the next step. And I started looking for a small apartment in Vancouver because I wanted Olivia to grow up in a place that was ours, not tied to the pain of my past. I found a one-bedroom place not far from my mom's house that I could afford with my bookstore job and some savings, and I signed the lease, my hands shaking with excitement because it felt like the first real step toward independence. Moving day was chaotic, with boxes everywhere and Olivia giggling in her stroller. But when I set up her crib in our new place, I looked around and felt this calm because I'd done this on my own, and nobody could take that away from me. Now, when I look at Olivia, who's almost a year old with her big bright eyes and her little laugh, I know every tear and every sleepless night was worth it because she's my world, and I've built a life for us despite Ryan and Sarah trying to tear it down. I'm still angry sometimes thinking about what they did, but I don't let it eat at me anymore because I've got a job and a home and a daughter who makes every day better. I walked away from the people who hurt me, and I'm standing taller than ever, and when I tuck Olivia into bed at night, I know this is my life now, and it's going to be beautiful because I made it that way.